Hello there, dear friends, and welcome once again to the Relaxed Fantasy Review. On this channel, we spend our time looking at fantasy of all sorts, from movies to books to games, and applying the characters within into the tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. Today, though, we're going to be looking at a character from one of our old classic Disney movies, but we're going to be looking at a villain this time. From Sleeping Beauty, the great dark fairy Maleficent. Maleficent is one of the most classic and iconic Disney villains. Oftentimes, when Disney villains are put into collaborations, in productions that happen in the Disney parks and other stuff like that, Maleficent is seen as the big bad. She is such an iconic villain and such an evil figure that she is often seen as the leader of the villains. How do you put something with that much power and that much evil into D&D? I mean, it's ripe for the picking. Let's have a look. Now, thanks to the Maleficent film, we actually know a lot about Maleficent that goes beyond the original animated classic. We know that she's a fairy. Her race is fairy. So, that's pretty easy. There was actually a fairy race added in a recent D&D book, The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, so it's easy to stat her for that. But what about her class? What kind of spellcaster is she? I actually have an answer for that. See, when she was younger, she had magic that was granted to her from fairy magic, but as she grew darker, she made a pact with a dark being. She specifically refers to using her magic as the power of hell. So, I said, let's make her a warlock. Specifically a fiend warlock. Can't get much more burny and blasty than that. Her alignment is chaotic evil. She's the leader of the enemies, but all she wants to really do is burn the place to the ground. I also gave her the Outlander background, since she was raised in the wild. Now, what about her stats? She's not super strong, although she probably could hold her own against a normal person. I gave her a strength of 12. She's not particularly fast, but she can move, just like any normal person could. I gave her a dex of 12. She's not really shown to take hits that much, but her superimposing size does give the idea that she could take a hit, so I gave her a constitution of 12 as well. Her intelligence, though, is 20. She seems to know all sorts of things about magic, arcana, nature. She's really, really smart. She also has a wisdom of 16. She's a plotter and a planner. Not the best one in the world, but she's definitely capable of keeping a long-term situation going. And then there's her charisma. The woman is an absolutely frightening presence, but she's got the magic to charm and to dissuade and sway and pretty much make people do her bidding. She controls an entire army basically by herself. So I put her charisma at 20. Not to mention that that's her spellcasting ability, and her magic is frighteningly powerful. I made her a level 20 warlock. Is there really any other way to do it? Maleficent is super strong. So, 20. Her saving throws that she's proficient in are wisdom and charisma. Her skills that she's proficient in are animal handling, arcana, deception, intimidation, nature, and perception, all things that make sense for her. She wields a quarterstaff, although it is a magical staff. I gave her a +2 magic staff. I also gave her a special set of robes, a +2 to armor class set of robes that have a special power to them. These things are a legendary magical item that allow her to cast Dimension Door at will, letting her teleport around like she does so often. Her armor class, therefore, is a 16. Her hit points are 120, and her speed is 30 as standard. Her languages that she speaks are common and Sylvan, because she can talk to the humans, but also to the fairies. She can wear light armor if necessary, use simple weapons, and isn't really proficient in any tool sets. But then there's her features. She gains flight from her fairy race, and she has the Dark One's blessing, which allows her to call upon the power of the fiend to buff her up. She also has several eldritch invocations, we'll go over which ones in a moment, and she's a Pact of the Chain warlock, wielding her pet raven as her familiar. She uses the Dark One's own luck to buff her up, fiendish resilience to give her resistance to magic, and the hurl through hell power, one of the Fiend Warlock's super abilities. And she has her Mystic Arcanum, which gives her her high-level spells, which we'll talk about here shortly. Now, I also gave her a magical item, which isn't in her possession, but it's something that she can do, and I wanted to stat this thing out. The spinning wheel that she uses to trap Sleeping Beauty. This is what I wrote it down as. Basically, the spinning wheel casts the spell Sequester, which puts people into states of suspended animation until certain prerequisites are met, and they normally become invisible. However, what I did was, this is how I wrote it down. When the spinning wheel's spindle is touched, it casts Sequester, without invisibility, and with no set condition for awakening. So, had the other fairies not intervened, it would have been a permanent sleep. And I wrote in little parentheses here, another spellcaster must set these conditions with a remove curse spell. So the remove curse spell doesn't end Sequester. It simply changes or sets the conditions for awakening. And the target cannot be awoken until these conditions are set and met. That's how Merryweather was able to set the conditions to get Princess Aurora out of the Sequester. And I felt like this was appropriate. Maleficent is 100 years old, looking good for her age, 7 foot tall and 200 pounds, with pale white skin, black hair, and black eyes to boot. As for her invocations, she has a lot, like I said. The Armor of Shadows invocation, the Beast Speech invocation, the Devil's Sight invocation, as well as Agonizing Blast and Repelling Blast to power up her Eldritch Blast. She has the Voice of the Chain Master, as well as the Aspect of the Moon and the Sign of Ill Omen. All of these paint a picture of this familiar-wielding, tough, able to talk to animals, able to use her magic to highly offensive abilities spellcaster. Maleficent is a force to behold. But what about her spells? She is a charisma caster after all, with a huge spell attack bonus of 13 and a spell save DC of 21, since she's level 20. Her cantrips, I gave her Druid Craft, thanks to her nature background, the Eldritch Blast cantrip, because duh, Mage Hand, Minor Illusion, and Prestidigitation. She's capable of doing a lot of things with her magic. She also has some first level spells, Fairy Fire, Find Familiar, Charm Person, Hellish Rebuke, and Hex, all classics for the Warlock. She also has Enlarge Reduce, Darkness, Invisibility, Misty Step, and Suggestion. You see her use most of these in the movies. As you get to the higher levels, they lessen a little bit. Warlocks tend to have a smaller spell list. Level 3, she can cast Fear. Level 4, she can cast Blight and Hallucinatory Terrain. Think about that thicket outside of her castle. At level 5, she casts Dream. And then for her Mystic Arcanum, at 6th level spell, she can cast Mass Suggestion. That makes sense, right? At level 7, the Force Cage power. At 8, Glibness. And at 9, True Polymorph. Because if you can be nothing else, be a dragon. And she transforms into an ancient black dragon using True Polymorph. This is a power that we've seen her use, and unfortunately was her undoing at the hands of a holy weapon. But at the end of the day, it was 100% seen and confirmed in the film that she has these kinds of spells. So I think it's really easy to give her this list. So, 20 levels of Warlock, all with the power to induce fear, manipulate minds, and destroy her enemies. Maleficent is a brutal character, and would make a phenomenal final big bad for any campaign that's going all the way to the higher levels. This character is one of the best villains out there, and you can't go wrong with picking her as your enemy. This has been the Relaxed Fantasy Review. If you enjoyed the video, Please like and subscribe down below, and keep your eyes open for more character creations coming down the line very soon. Have a good one, my friends.